Alright, so let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is always keep a backup file. I either zip it or do some other format where it cannot be changed. In this case, essentially just copy this file into your working directory. Feel free to be as organized as you feel. I find that being more organized lets me have more power over the dynamics of where and how I use my code. So let's go ahead and make a new folder here and go to tutorials. And in here I'm just going to put blocks template. Now when we do a template, we mean that essentially what we want is the ability to expand the website without expanding the file space. We want to simply be able to create a function where whatever is necessary to load on that time is going to be what's loaded. Everything else will be on standby. So we use multiple files to essentially organize all these details. Okay, so we will essentially ignore the login, calendar, all of that. We only really want to work with this, so of course we're going to probably lose some links in the process, but that's fine. We're going to play with those links later. So open it up in your favorite browser and let's begin the process. So first we have to figure out in what way we want to actually organize this. For instance, we do want to do it based on component. So when we look at a nav bar, that's a single component that can be separated from the rest of the page. It still has a CSS that works together with the page, but as far as functionality and the div itself, it can be extracted into its own section. Then we can continue observing the layout of this particular page and then consider a few things. Well, we've got blocks consistently and consistent sizes, and essentially they give us a much nicer way to do the template. So we would essentially have a file for the nav and the body, since it is a part of the body content, and we'll start within the inside, start creating these little blocks. But it doesn't stop there. We have to consider the next step. We have to still zoom in on the process. Inside of each block we do have a title, so that's a good way to kind of start separating those pieces internally, and we'll see how to organize which components belong to the blocks and which components belong to the nav bar and pieces like that. It's a very flexible method, and it basically mimics your typical Angular process or any form of single page access. It's just going to be pure PHP, JavaScript, and CSS with as little frameworks as possible. And of course, after that, we can look in further and consider that we've got smaller components within each block itself, and sometimes they're related, sometimes they are not. So this will give us the ability to customize what's inside and eventually create a program that will automatically create these blocks based on necessity, based on potentially if you're selling these blocks of functionality, based on block you can sell a specific type of tool, and you can have that tool be inputted into the template without extra work, without extra space as well. Okay, so now that we kind of have an idea of how we want to work this, it's going to basically work in this process. But we want to also consider the pattern continues until the footer, and the footer, of course, it can be there or gone depending on preference. But of course, for a legitimate website, it will be something we want present. So we'll put that in the footer space as well. Alright, so first things first, let's go ahead and basically copy this file over and make a copy into a PHP format. If you don't have this particular external extension for the file, you do have to make some changes to your file editor, especially if it's one of your first times coding. You want to make sure that those file extensions are essentially there. You want to go to View, and you can both do hidden items and file name extensions, and that will show you this. This gives us the ability to basically change this file into a PHP file and actually change the functionality of the file with an actual prompt as well. So I am sure I want to change it, yes. Perfect. So one thing to know is that this will not work within your browser if you haven't done PHP. This course will essentially be for anyone, including beginners, so there will be sometimes I divert into side information. But for the course situation, you will want to know that you cannot run this inside of a browser. Your PHP has to run on a server, like an Apache server. If you run it in a browser, it'll treat it like a regular file. and essentially download it, and then boom, that's all you can do. So this will not work if you do not have a server set up. There will be other videos that will explain this, or you can YouTube another one right now. So this index.php again only works through the server, so we do need to connect. So by most standards, when you put in a server, for instance, you will have the local host area available. If you don't like words, you like numbers, then you can use this number IP address. It'll get you to the same place. All right, so we want to access this, so we just follow our structure. A little bit of detail on the XAMPP structure, so I'm gonna skip that detail. I've organized it in my own manner, so for me, my root is where most of my code is. So I'm gonna follow my process, my location that I've set up. Perfect. All right, so of course we want to make sure we're loading the PHP. I know currently we are loading the PHP because PHP have priority, but in this case I'm just going to take this and put something different like backup.index.html. This helps me, one, keep the code so I have a reference, and two, be able to remove the standard index HTML being loaded just in case. So I'm going to refresh just in case, and boom. Okay, so from here we want to open this up in our editor, and we want to start taking a look at some of the processes working inside. So if you're not familiar with HTML, this won't go too much into the detail of what each part does, but it will go into your ability to organize your files using some quick tools. And in this case, this file is not too organized, so yeah, these tools aren't going to work so well. All right, so we're going to consider first that the head in itself is its own component, and we're going to go ahead and load that up. And since I can't trust this tabbed file, I'm just going to go from head to head, and I'm going to Control X, and I am going to cut it because now right away I'm going to put PHP require and start naming my structure. This is the most efficient way to go. For instance, now we want to have an includes folder, so I'll go ahead and write the whole thing, and then here we're going to have head.php. Right now it's not available, so if I try to load this in our browser, or in this case refresh, it's going to say something's wrong. Well, first, PHP, you have to make sure that you do close each time you open for a PHP. I won't go too much into why everything is used. As far as you're using it the way you see it, you will have no problem. In the future, of course, you can learn more details about why it is that way. These videos are going to be quick, so essentially I want to make sure that the process is not too cluttered. So that's going to give us a error. The file does not exist, etc., etc. And because we're using a require, it's actually requiring the page to load based on that file being included. If it doesn't include, the whole page stops loading. So that's why in that case it didn't work. But in this case, let me show you another way to do this with components that you may need to be optional, not always required. So there we go. In this case, include is optional, but it still tries to load the whole page. In this case, if that part doesn't load, obviously the head is very important and gives us a bit of an issue with the design. So those are the two ways to import different files based on whether you need it, you require it, or if you just want to include it just in case or optionally. Okay, so now let's go ahead and mimic this process here in our folder structure. New file, call this head.php. Yes, I want to change, and then we start expanding. Now I'm going to paste this here and save right away. Since we've already done the setup, this is now connected. The file exists and this is already connected to that file. So now when I do a refresh, we will have, of course, oh, I know what I did. I always do this. I always, no, not this time. Let me see. Index on line 3, index PHP line 3. Am I missing something? Super simple. I didn't spell require correctly. And just to be complete, there we go. One thing about programming that I really like is the fact that even a small mistake in spelling will break. I do like that. Anyway, apart from digression, so now we've kind of have our header separated from the rest of our page, but again, remember that it basically includes it all together into a single page. So all the processing is done on the server, and it's prepping the page. It's like the cook in the kitchen, and he's preparing the header in a different plate, a different file. So we're going to apply this process to the rest of the next video and actually take it apart using this, and we'll go into the blocks as well and be a little more detailed with those blocks. So see you there.